All right.
Good morning, doctor. Welcome back.
Good morning, Venkatesh. Nice to be back.
Great, great. So, continuing with our small sub series on emotional intelligence and how we manage ourselves emotionally, one of the topics that we had mentioned would be important would be motivation. And motivation is important because, at some level, one way or the other, we have to motivate ourselves to sort of get going to do things that we need to do, persist with them, and do them with the appropriate intensity, as we will discuss soon. All of these are parts of motivation, and all of this is important to manage our lives, manage our emotions in a well balanced way, and why it's part of our discussion series here. Yes. So I'll hand over with
Right.
that to you, doctor.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Well, nice to be again with you, Venkatesh. And
Absolutely.
today's topic,
Likewise.
of course, is a continuation. And then there is an element of today's topic which is universal, but not understood or appreciated.
Right.
Motivation. You ask
Correct.
somebody in the other bus stand, you'll say, who is motivating you? He'll say, no, I don't know. There is no motivation for me, because to
Correct.
appreciate there is a motivation itself requires a little understanding.
Correct.
But there is a motivation for every little thing and every person.
Correct.
Without that, the work cannot run. So
Yeah.
we forget that. So we forget that, that motivation is an inescapable component of our living.
Correct.
And we better understand it rightly the way it is meant to be.
Correct.
So, here we are. Next slide, please. Yeah. Etymology. Etymology means how a word is derived, how a word is arrived at.
Correct.
Etymology of motivation is uh, there is a Latin word called moviere. That is
Right.
French, actually, French Latin derivative. And that it actually means move. When
Correct.
you are moving something, you are motivating.
Correct.
Yeah. It may sound a little odd,
Yeah.
but whatever
Producing
you are
motion. Yeah. You need to
doing,
produce motion in anything. Correct.
yeah. So otherwise, nothing will move.
Correct.
So somebody has to motivate something somewhere so that something will move, or else everything is a standstill.
Correct.
So motivation is a necessary, inescapable condition for our very life.
Right.
And so we are, movier, to move, is there to kickstart our little discussion in etymology. Next
Yes.
slide, please.
Yeah.
Now, for any motivation, there is a role model required. Now, this is a bit of a categorical statement. Again,
Right.
it's an extension of the previous one. Why
Right.
do I need a role model to motivate myself? That,
Correct.
that itself is a denial of the need for motivation.
Correct.
And role model is there, and some of them are appreciated and some of them are not.
Correct.
Next slide, please.
Yes. I think it takes. We should take a minute to discuss this a little further. I think
Yeah,
uh, the point that at some level, whether somebody else is motivating us or we are sort of internally creating a need to move, we need to have a
right,
mental picture of something we are moving towards, right?
right,
And I think that's where role model is very important. We of course tend to
right,
think of role models as people, and they are the most powerful things. But you move towards something, right? And
right,
the
right,
role model is required to sort of create that pull towards something that one wants to do. I thought it was
right.
worth just explaining that point, that why a role
Yeah,
model
yeah.
is a way to state that. Any comments, doctor, on that?
Yeah, actually, this very thing is coming up in the next couple of
In the next.
slides.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
it will be
Yeah.
simplifying whatever we have done. Here you
Yes.
see a man, quite a handsome looking guy, and his name is, you know, you can imagine how somebody invented the electric bulb, and
Correct.
Thomas Edison was the guy,
Correct.
and he was a dogged kind of a man.
Right.
He was experimenting with little, wires through
Right.
which current will pass and it will give light, but it will not get burnt by itself.
Correct.
So something has to burn without burning itself was the challenge.
Correct.
So Thomas Edison from Ohio, where I spent some time,
Correct.
he was the one who tried almost all elements.
Correct.
He tried carbon and he tried some other metals, he tried some other alloys,
Correct.
and all of them would glow for a microsecond and
Correct.
then burn up, you
Correct.
know. So his challenge was to have a light emitting bulb,
Correct.
incandescent lamp. We used to call it incandescent lamp because that is the way the first electric bulb was brought into operation.
Correct.
There was incandescence of that something. And he
Correct.
kept on trying.
Correct.
One filament after filament, he kept trying, and every time he would end up with a burnt filament. And
Correct.
so he was about to lose hope. But
Correct.
then he said, no, I'm not going to give up.
Right.
I'm going to I'm motivating myself. There's nobody to motivate Thomas
Correct.
Edison. And he was motivating himself.
Correct.
And finally, he arrived at the tungsten thing.
Correct.
And the tungsten was the first wire to be used in electric bulbs.
Right.
So
Correct.
Thomas Alva Edison goes by a historical background.
Correct.
And then he became a double hero. And the Edison went on to discover and invent so many other electrical gadgets and so
Correct.
forth.
Correct.
But here we are looking at how
The light bulb.
motivation is required. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
Now, when you are motivating anybody for anything or against anything, whatever, our mindset goes through a series of stages.
Right.
To begin with, you will say, no, I won't do it, because you are not in favor of motivating yourself. So he will say, okay, let it be. I don't care. I don't want,
Correct.
So he would say, I won't do it.
Correct.
But then gradually after motivation, he would say, I cannot do it. From I will not do it, he come down to I cannot do it.
Correct.
And then I want to do it. The desire to act comes up.
Correct. Correct.
And then you wonder how you do it, etc., etc. Finally, at the very top of the heap, you
Correct.
see the guy saying, I will do it, and he does it.
Correct.
This is a management diagram, which is again thrown around every management school, every B school for that matter, every psychology professor would teach you this. But it is important to know that there is a series of stages or steps that one goes through this, because right from gross resistance to change or something to actually ending up doing it was the thing that people had to appreciate. Any comment, Venkatesh?
Yes. So I think just combining the example of Edison earlier and the slide, I can see why this slide is actually possibly one of the most important in this discussion. That moving from I can't do it to I want to do it is his proverbial 1% inspiration, right? Edison famously said, doing anything is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. You are explaining how this filament business, he may have had this inspiration, that role model, I want to create something bright, and that bright has to be like a lamp. That is what I want to do it in this ladder diagram is, right? But then how do I do it? And I have to keep on trying, and I have to keep on trying, and keep on trying is the persistence, right? And that is combined in motivation. You need that something which will make you move forward, but you also need to keep at it is only when you think the task is doable. And that's why you are the very last two steps of this is I can do it. If you take on a task that you don't feel you can do, it's very difficult to stick at it. So there's a wealth of actually many flavors in this diagram that we can talk about in different sessions. But I think it's a very important diagram, actually.
Right. Actually, it was Edison's own mother or some sister or some family member.
Mother.
Father, okay. That person said, why do you keep on wasting your time here? It's midnight now. You're sitting here and burning filaments and all that. Give it up. They said that Edison's determination was put to further test, and he did it. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
Primarily, the role model for any person is his own daddy, like Venkatesh himself will know, because daddy is there from the moment you are born. So mother is also important, but then mother is more domesticated. Daddy is more outwardly aggressive. So role model sort of by default went on to the daddy.
Right.
As we know, no role model is perfect unless you have the background. So daddy and mommy put together will be the role models, etc. But the role model is right at home, right under your nose, right at home. And that is how it starts, because any positive stroke that you give to yourself becomes your role model. and it goes on till you reach adulthood and till you even become old man.
Right.
So the
Correct.
role model element is always there and should be there in a fairly stable, uh, good family.
Right.
Both the parents are there
Correct.
all the time when they are needed.
Correct.
And today, of course, with family structure collapsing, and
Correct.
I'm not sitting in political judgment,
Correct.
with single parents, there is one element of role model missing,
Right.
etc., etc. So,
Correct.
but basically, universally it is accepted, acknowledged that one's own father is the first role model. However much the father may or may not, may not agree,
Right.
So that is how it goes.
Correct.
Next slide, Venkatesh. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now, when you say motivation, there are some components to motivation. We saw a series of staircases there when
Right.
somebody was climbing up, and each step had its own tonality of determination, and so
Correct.
forth.
Correct.
And here we have three major components that have been identified by psychologists. It's one psychologist, by the way. It's
Right.
not the truth or the ultimate truth, but it is
Correct.
there. There are
Correct.
three elements that have to be appreciated.
Correct.
First one is you activate yourself.
Correct.
Yeah, you activate yourself. You have to pat yourself or you have to pinch yourself on the back or
Or
whatever.
pull yourself.
But you
Either way.
activate.
Correct.
You have to activate. And after activating, you have to persist on it.
Yeah.
You can't say, okay, I got it, and then I'll come back tomorrow to pick it up again and all that. No,
Correct. Correct.
you have to persist.
Correct.
And as you keep persisting, the intensity of your activation and persistence will have to be upped.
Correct.
So, for example, it's well known in exercises and so forth, sports,
Correct.
that you have to really increase the intensity of your sport effort.
Correct.
And otherwise, your motivation will wither away.
Correct.
They would say motivation, persistence, and intensity are the three major elements or components of motivation.
Correct.
And by and large, it works. Without your knowledge, willy-nilly, you're activating yourself, you're persisting on something, and you are intensifying your effort. Be
Correct.
it swimming, lifting, or boxing, or whatever.
Correct.
You have to keep on increasing it. Like
Correct.
we give the example, Sergei Bubka in pole vault.
Correct.
You had to keep on increasing the height of the pole as you would vault.
Correct.
So that became relevant. Yeah. Any comment, Venkatesh?
No, I think this again, like we mentioned, that staircase and this one together, I think are sort of very central to this presentation, because many
Right.
people tend to think of motivation as only the activation phase, right?
Right.
I'm
Right.
It's sort of very simplistically, I'm not feeling motivated is I don't feel like starting. But that's not it,
Right.
right? You have to start and keep at it is the persistence. And I think you mentioned a very important point on intensity, right? Many times people are going through the motions without any intensity. Then it sort of becomes self-defeating. Soon when
Right.
you are not putting enough effort, then you say, oh, nothing is happening. I'm not feeling like continuing this activity. So they are all
Right.
interconnected. The intensity
Right.
has to keep on getting upped while one does it. It can't be just a check the box, as you call it. So very
Right.
important points, doctor. Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Right. So, okay. Now, motivation for convenience of didactic purposes can be divided into internal motivation and external motivation.
Correct.
The internal motivation is something that you learn, you pick up the correct attitude, you achieve the right balance, you create whatever, and that has an effect on your physiological makeup and so forth. That is
Correct.
coming from inside.
Correct.
You are kindling the Kundalini, as you would say. Kundalini, of
Correct.
course, is philosophical,
Correct.
but you are activating it.
Correct.
Then there are external motivators like there is an incentive. If
Correct.
you do this, you'll get it. If you don't do this, you won't get it, and so forth.
Correct.
Incentive. And that
Correct.
incentive also goes with fear. If you don't do it, I'll punish you.
Correct.
So fear of punishment is there.
Correct.
And power,
Correct.
yeah, and affiliation, there are external elements which will take you through the motivation. But
Correct.
ultimately, the end result is motivation anyway.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
for example, in a company where I was training the sales managers, the
Right.
sales manager set a target,
Correct.
and the target must be achieved by 25th of the month.
Correct.
Until 24th, you are not getting anything,
Correct.
and you are afraid that you lose your job.
Correct.
And And like that, there are examples and examples. So,
Correct, correct.
any comment, Venkatesh?
Yeah, no, very powerful combinations of thoughts, doctor. So, in fact, I
Right.
like for example, if I combine this with the ladder diagram, right? Fear is
Yeah.
useful till the point where you think you can do it. But let's say
Right.
you're afraid about something and you feel it's beyond you. After some time, you'll
Right.
freeze, right? So, good
Right.
manager
Right.
also has to know, for example, a good manager, or when we are setting targets for ourselves, you have to keep the fear
Right.
within a certain zone. And I like the fact that you mentioned physiology, because once you get into a fear zone where you're going to freeze or run away, then you have negative motivation, right? So
Right.
uh,
Right.
this requires a sort of respect for both these circles, right? One needs to understand the
Right.
internals, and the
Right.
guys who are driving the external need to manage it. Very good points, doctor. Very good points. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, whatever you are doing in your life, there is an Everest in your own mind, in yourself, which needs to
Correct.
be conquered.
Correct.
No, you have to win over something, and you have to establish that your victory is permanent,
Correct.
and you have to conquer your Everest. This is metaphorically speaking. You have an Everest, and you have to
Correct.
conquer it.
Correct.
Allah, to take the help of Ramayana, you will say you got the metaphoric ocean,
Correct.
and you got metaphoric Hanuman there, and so forth. So
Correct.
every little thing you are doing, you are overcoming an obstacle,
Correct.
and that conquering has to be interpreted and implemented in every possible way, so that you sustain your emotions,
Correct.
motivation,
Correct.
and so forth.
Correct.
Yeah. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One
Time
important
wise, you're
point.
okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Time,
time wise we
time
are
wise.
fine. Yes,
Okay.
I'm checking. One important point you made here, and in fact, it brought something to my mind. So, like you said, if there is an Everest in your mind, there is some goal you want to go after. But quite often, that Everest can also look like an obstacle, right? And actually,
Right.
your motivation has to be enough to cross an obstacle. Is an
Right.
intrinsic part of motivation, right? Motivation is required so that you can overcome an obstacle. So I was
Right.
reminded of a statement my brother, your other son, Vittal makes, right?
Ah.
Which is that you need to climb the wall of worry. For something to
Right.
climb, you need to climb something. So in fact, quite often, actions or movement further up happens when you have some obstacle to overcome, and your
Right.
motivation gets engaged in that way, whether it's individuals or societies or countries or whatever else. So it's an interesting thought. An Everest
Right.
is like a goal, but it's also an obstacle, right? You need to cross it. Is how motivation begins actually.
Correct. True.
Yes.
True. So it goes without saying that in leadership, yeah, there is always a motivation. Unless you are a good motivator, you cannot become a leader.
Correct.
And vice versa. Leadership and motivation go together. They are, in fact, two sides of the same coin.
Correct.
And motivation workshops and leadership workshops always overlap. And
Correct.
they both need to be bolstered, both need to be reinforced. So you have to reinforce motivation so that your leadership becomes that much more powerful and effective, and
Correct.
vice versa.
Correct.
So let's see what goes on in that.
Yes.
So there is something when you motivate something or somebody, what does that motivation need to? Motivation doesn't mean that leadership and your power and all will land on your lap and
Correct.
you're just sitting there quiet. It requires effort and it
Correct.
requires extra energy. And
Correct.
that is when we burn the midnight oil. Now Venkatesh will know I am Ahmedabad. I will give them training in which
Correct.
they'll give you a bunch of documents at 10:30 at night, and
Correct.
they will expect a PowerPoint presentation, flawless, impeccable PowerPoint presentation by 12 o'clock at night. And it may appear, outrageous for
Correct.
an outsider. Then they will say, okay, it is like a military training. You
Correct.
have to jump hurdle, and then you have to cross, and you have to do it. You tumble and fall, break your leg or something. That's okay, part of the game. So
Correct.
burning the midnight oil or putting in that little extra, not little extra, many times enormously extra
Correct.
effort
Correct.
is required after motivation. So motivation doesn't begin and end in itself.
Correct.
Motivation calls for burning the midnight oil. Next slide, please.
Correct.
Any comment, Rinku?
Yeah, this I think connects very well to the earlier slide you had put, Doctor, on persistence and intensity, right? That
Right,
you have to
right,
train yourself slowly to not just feel activated, but be able to persist and persist with intensity. What you just described is
Right.
exactly that, right? And
Right. Right.
as we now come to the previous slide to that, just talked about why leadership is about motivation, which I guess is the topic of this one. It's about creating the external environment also to recruit the internal or intrinsic factors.
Right.
So yes, that's the setup to this slide. Yes, please, doctor.
Yeah. So you require an incentive. For a motivation, you require an incentive, and that incentive doesn't have to be, only in the form of money or some pleasure or something. That
Correct.
incentive, internal motivation,
Correct.
that the pressure is there. And if you are a sensible person, you rise to the occasion yourself without somebody goading you,
Correct.
and so forth. Either way, if there is motivation, it can be of two types. You can threaten, and create a fear complex, or you can appreciate it, a pat on the back and so forth. So this is called as carrot versus stick
Stick. Correct.
approach to management.
Correct.
You achieve the target by 25th, or else you lose your job.
Correct.
That kind of thing. Other side is you achieve your target and do it positively,
You'll get
and
an
you
incentive.
yeah, yeah. So carrot versus excuse me. Carrot versus stick is a management perennial alternative or choice that is kept in front of you.
Correct.
But of course, it depends on you how you tackle the two.
Correct.
You can tackle the carrot, or you can tackle only the stick. You can only use the stick to keep beating, or you can pacifying yourself, bribing yourself with carrot. If you are getting used to the bribing with carrot, then you'll not be able to work otherwise. So
Correct. Correct.
every little, yeah, any comment, Venkatesh?
No, this actually is a classic example of what the whole theme, a whole series is about balance, right? It
Yeah,
cannot be only
yeah,
about carrots and it cannot be only about sticks, right?
right, right,
Either of them will lose their value, or it will become counterproductive if you
right,
overdo either of them, right? And you
correct,
overdo
correct,
external, then no internal capacity for motivation will be built. And
right.
if you think that only internal is enough, then that also is an imbalance to you. So it's all about balance. Absolutely.
Quite, quite right. Yeah. Next slide. Here is a classic example of Hanumanji. Keeps coming time and again. When we talk about managing yourself, managing uncertainty, doing this, doing that, it's a endless series of steps to go through.
Correct.
And you take the example of Hanuman. And
Correct.
there are similar examples in Mahabharata also.
Correct.
Now, Hanuman, as we saw on some other occasion, Hanuman is a monkey, was a monkey. And when this monkey army was sort of pushed to the extreme of to the southern tip of Bharat,
Correct.
yeah, so there was no place to go beyond, and on the other side there is sea or ocean,
Correct.
and you're going to die anyway. So if
Correct.
you fall in the sea, the monkeys cannot swim,
Correct.
and the monkey will die.
Correct.
Or else if you stay on this side, your enemy will kill you, so you'll die anyway. So
Right.
this kind of a dilemma, which ultimately forces you to mobilize your power and do it,
Correct.
like you say, leap of
Leap of
faith,
faith. Correct. Correct.
faith, faith. Hanuman did that,
Correct.
and he managed to jump on Sakris. He gathered all the willpower he had,
Correct.
and he did it.
Correct.
So this is an internal motivation. Of course, there were people like Jambuan and others in the army.
Correct.
Those oldish could not have that courage and willpower to cross the sea. So they ultimately chose Hanuman by consensus or even by otherwise.
Correct.
And Hanuman did it because he represented the collective wisdom and strength of the entire army of
Correct.
Vanaras. You
Correct.
know, so this is it's an extraordinary motivation level,
Correct.
and he did it, and he
Correct.
succeeded.
Correct.
So
No, it's a beautiful
next.
example, doctor, because actually I was just thinking everything that you said till now has
Hmm.
actually come across in that example, right?
Yeah,
There was
right,
the fear because Sugriva had said, don't come back without news on Sita. There
right.
was the incentive to come back and please him and please Rama by saying, no, we did find Sita. Jambavan made him believe he can do it, that it was a doable task. It was within his power to do it. And he had the
Right.
affiliation that he had come there with his entire troop and he was representing them by jumping across to Lanka. So it's literally a
Right.
beautiful example of all the things we discussed till now, right? His
Yeah.
own internal motivation, Jambavan sort of step changed it and said, "Don't worry, you can do it. You're good enough. Please go for it." Perfect.
Right.
Perfect.
Great motivator.
Yes. And Jambavan is therefore a great example of motivation, right? He tells you
Yeah, yeah,
he's a
yeah.
role model for someone who can tell you, Arey, you have the power, do it, go ahead.
Yeah, his role was clear that he didn't have the physical strength, but he had the mental stamina
Correct.
to see through. So he could distill his energy into the person and
Correct.
then sort of infuse that element of sort of sense of dedication and success
Into
through
Hanuman.
sheer willpower.
Correct.
So
Correct.
Jambuan's willpower is as important as Hanuman's willpower, like
Correct.
that.
Correct.
No, you can interpret it any which way you want. But
Correct.
then, okay, slightly switching gears, you see, in modern terminology, we just now saw carrot and,
Stick.
you know, excuse me, carrot and a stick. Okay.
Correct.
Now, here is an example where there is a perpetual permanent situation created by manipulators of human behavior. That if you
Correct.
want something to be done, you have to do it. I'll dangle a carrot in front of you, but
Correct.
I'll see to it that you don't get the carrot because you have tied it in such a way that it cannot
It's
catch
always
it.
out of reach. It is always out of reach.
Yeah.
Correct.
So
Correct.
you create an incentive which is unachievable.
Correct.
You create a target which is beyond you, and
Correct.
you will remain beyond you. And
Correct.
there are many managers who do this, but then they are many times they are exposed. The game they play
Correct.
gets exposed. But that is part of management, part of living in general. So
Correct.
set a target which is unachievable is a ploy.
Correct.
We can discuss this in HR terms later on or
No, but
whatever.
it's also,
That's a universal phenomenon.
yeah.
Any comment, Katesh?
No, I think very important point, Doctor. Again, it goes back to the theme you have talked about in so many of the sessions, right? That good values are important and good values are practical. See, beyond a point, any intelligent person or just even our physiology, if there is never a reward actualized, right?
Right,
If you do the situation, right, that what you have shown here in this diagram, that it's always
right,
out of reach. At some point, defeatism will set in, no matter what you try to tell the person, right? So
right, right,
and manipulation, finally, as human beings, we quickly realize we are being manipulated. And then, sort of all the words and everything else you do will fall on deaf ears. It will not happen forever, right? So you will not build sustainable motivation as a leader or as a manager if
right,
you keep on doing something like this. And why there is actually no sense in doing that. I think one of the
right.
themes you have been talking about across everything is sustainability, right? Anything you do should
Yeah.
sustain. So this won't sustain. Sooner or later, the donkey will say, "You're not giving me the carrot. I need to eat. Give me a carrot." Actually,
Or will kick the boss.
absolutely, absolutely. Yes,
Next slide, please.
yes.
Now, here is
This is the
another
last
classic
slide,
example.
doctor.
Last slide, no? Yeah. Now, it's a famous example of a spider. You
Correct,
know, King Bruce of Scotland was chased by his enemies, and he ran and took shelter in a cave.
correct,
And in the cave, he is saying that I have tried to beat the other king so many times, but I couldn't. So I'm going to give up.
correct,
And then as he was doing that, he saw that spider sitting in one corner of the cave, and that spider spinning its web. And he kept on doing it. The spider spinning web is unending, literally.
correct,
So he kept watching it. He said, here is a spider who keeps on spinning webs and without any stop. Something happens, some little bird flies in and disturbs the spider net or whatever.
correct,
Or something else happens, a wind blows and then the net is gone, spider's web is gone, and so forth. He went, looked at all of that for quite some time. And then he saw that finally the spider won.
correct,
It was maybe a mythological impossibility or whatever, but the spider won.
correct.
And the spider was, and
Dogged.
Bruce was quite, yeah, Bruce was quite astonished by the persistence, perseverance that the spider exhibited,
Correct,
like Thomas Alva Edison and his incandescent lamp.
correct,
So he looked at that thing, and then for sixth or seventh or eighth or 10th time,
correct,
the spider tried and it succeeded.
correct,
And he
correct.
said, "Hey, if the spider can do it, I can
So
do
can
it." Like
correct.
If so and so can do it, if so and so Mount Everest was climbed by somebody, Tenzing Norgay and so forth, I can do it. So that infuses confidence in yourself,
Correct.
and you start all over again. You keep
Correct.
starting all over again. That's important.
Correct.
Start all over again if your motivation doesn't take you through in one go.
Correct.
So
Correct.
that's
No,
that
very
is how
important
it's.
point.
Yeah,
Correct. Correct. No, I
that's
think.
where we.
Sorry. Yes, doctor.
Yeah, go ahead. No, nothing. I was finishing anyway. Yeah, go
Yes,
ahead.
please go ahead. Please go ahead. Yes, please give us your thoughts, and then I'll summarize as usual. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, it's the typical summary session belongs to Venkatesh. But I always say that whenever we interact with people, you know,
Correct.
uh, online or offline or whatever, many of these examples keep coming back and forth.
Correct.
So there is no one universal truth or one universal principle that is kept up by, understood by anybody. So
Correct.
we keep repeating many of these themes,
Correct.
and as we repeat, newer words, strike newer thoughts.
Correct.
For example, the same thing said in a word of A B C D, when it's placed at EFGH, you
Correct.
get newer thoughts striking you.
Correct.
So that time, when newer things come out of sort of what could be the same old thing, but it is a new thing. So your
Correct.
mind thinks better. So in our interactive sessions, we do it that way.
Correct.
We say,
Correct.
okay, a theme, for example, motivation is a topic which is handled by hundreds and thousands of trainers.
Correct.
But then even you start doing that motivation, your new horizon opens in front of you,
Correct.
like that.
Correct.
So
Yes.
that
Yes. Absolutely.
Venkatesh will continue. Yeah.
No, so I
Give
think
us an
this was, as we had discussed, part of our smaller sub series on how we regulate our emotions, manage our emotions for our wellness, and the last of these next week will sort of combine all of this into self regulation. Uh,
right,
we saw today that motivation requires something to activate us. We
right,
need to start moving. It's about motion. First of all, motivation is about motion, about action, which we have emphasized across all our talks. Doctor has been talking about that action is the most important thing. But it's not about one-off action. You need to persist, and you need to do it with sufficient intensity, and that requires for us to go from saying I can't do it or I won't do it to saying I can do it and I will do it. There are intrinsic factors which all of us, as human beings, our biology, our physiology works in a particular way. We need to understand that and use it. Managers, leaders need to recruit that, not only sticking to fear or only to incentives, but actually doing it in a sensible, sustainable way. Finally, something like Hanuman's example or even Bruce's example, and we didn't delve deep into it today, but what we have done across sessions is to say you can't keep doing something when there is uncertainty and difficulty without some faith, right? If you remember, we had done a very early topic on faith and why faith is
right,
necessary, right? And we say Shraddha and Saburi go together. That the patience to keep doing what Edison did requires some faith, and
right,
therefore they go hand in hand. And why spiritual wellness is so interconnected with emotional wellness. All of that
right.
is part of why we did this discussion. Yes, thank you so much, Doctor, as always, and look forward to next week. Next week we'll cover self-regulation and sort of complete this mini series on EQ.
Good. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Bye.